The water in the Maldives wasn't just blue. It was a shimmering tapestry of turquoise and sapphire, so clear you could see the white sand 30 feet below. From the deck of his private overwater bungalow at the Serafina Resort, Conrad Beaumont felt like a king surveying his kingdom. Beside him, the beautiful Kira Jensen laughed, her hand resting on her barely there baby bump. This was it, the perfect escape, a Babymoon for the child he believed would complete his perfect life. But 8,000 miles away, his 9 months pregnant wife Lorraine wasn't packing a hospital bag. She was systematically dismantling his empire, one phone call at a time. Conrad's paradise was about to become his prison, and the first clang of the bars shutting was the quiet, humiliating sound of a credit card being declined. Conrad Beaumont didn't just live the American dream. He'd coded it, monetized it, and sold the IPO. His company Nexus Pay had revolutionized the fintech world, turning him from a caffeine-fueled coder in a garage into a titan of industry before his 35th birthday. His life was a carefully curated collection of success symbols, a sprawling penthouse overlooking Central Park, a garage filled with cars that whispered of power rather than shouted, and a beautiful, intelligent wife, Lorraine Davenport. Lorraine was no mere socialite. She was a Davenport, a name that carried the quiet weight of old money and legal prowess. With a law degree from Yale and a mind as sharp as a shard of glass, she had been Nexus Pay's first general counsel. She was the architect of its ironclad legal structure, the silent partner who had secured the fortress while Conrad led the charge. They had been a team, an unstoppable force. But 3 years ago, after a difficult journey with fertility treatments, Lorraine had stepped back. Her new project, the one that mattered most, was growing inside her, their son. In the final weeks of her pregnancy, a subtle chill had crept into their opulent home. Conrad, once doting and present, became a ghost in his own life. "It's the pressure of the Q4 report," he'd say, kissing her forehead, before disappearing back to the office for another late night. "Just securing our boy's future, darling." Lorraine, swollen and exhausted, wanted to believe him, but she hadn't gotten where she was by being naive. She noticed the small things. The second phone that was always silenced and face down. The scent of a perfume, a light floral scent, nothing like her own sandalwood and vanilla, that clung faintly to his shirts. The way his eyes would glaze over when she talked about Lamar's classes, his mind clearly a million miles away. The lie that broke the dam was a simple one. "I have to fly to Singapore," he announced one evening, meticulously folding a brand-new linen shirt into his suitcase. "A surprise summit with our Asian market investors. It's last minute a real pain, but it's $1 billion deal. I'll be back in 5 days, long before the little guy decides to make his debut." He looked her in the eye as he said it. The sincerity in his gaze was so polished, so practiced, it was almost perfect. Almost. Lorraine smiled, a placid, gentle expression that betrayed none of the acid churning in her stomach. "Of course, my love. Be safe. Close that deal for our family." As soon as the penthouse door clicked shut, her serene mask crumbled. She moved with a purpose that defied her heavy belly, heading straight for his home office. She wasn't looking for texts or emails. That was amateur hour. Conrad was a tech genius. His digital security was flawless. But his weakness, she knew, was his ego. And his ego was serviced by one thing above all else: luxury retail. She logged into the shared family account for their concierge service, a high-end firm that handled everything from private jet bookings to sourcing rare watches. She scrolled through the recent activity. A dinner reservation for two at a place he'd told her was booked solid for months. A purchase from a high-end baby boutique in Soho, strange, since they had a fully stocked nursery. But it was the last item that made the air leave her lungs in a silent scream. A charge from Boucheron and Fields, their private jeweler. The work order attached as a PDF for their records was for a custom-made charm bracelet. It was a push present, a gift for a new mother. But the details were horrifyingly specific. A platinum band with 3 charms, a miniature globe, a tiny, intricately detailed seaplane, and a small engraved disc. Lorraine zoomed in on the jeweler's digital mock-up. The engraving on the disc read, "For KJ, our adventure begins. Love. See, KJ." The initials hit her like a physical blow. Kira Jensen, a bright, ambitious marketing associate from Nexus Pay. 26 years old, raven-haired with the kind of hungry look in her eyes that Lorraine recognized because she used to have it herself. Lorraine had seen the way Conrad's gaze lingered on Kira during the last company gala. A fleeting moment, but she had filed it away, a splinter of unease in the back of her mind. The globe, the seaplane. It wasn't Singapore. It was a destination, a private romantic trip. The baby boutique. The push present. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. Kira Jensen was pregnant too. This wasn't just an affair. It was a betrayal of a magnitude she could barely comprehend. He was building a second life, a mirror image of their own, with a younger model. For a long moment, Lorraine simply stood there, in the silent, cavernous office, the glow of the monitor illuminating the tears that now streamed down her face. The grief was a physical weight pressing down on her chest, threatening to suffocate her. She felt the baby kick, a strong, insistent reminder of the life she was carrying, the family she thought she was building. And in that moment, the grief began to cool. It hardened, solidifying into something else. Something cold sharp and diamond hard. Rage. She was Lorraine Davenport. Her name meant something. Her father hadn't raised a victim. Conrad had mistaken her love for weakness. He had mistaken her pregnancy for incapacitation. He had forgotten who he had married. He had forgotten that the woman who built the legal walls of his fortress knew exactly where all the back doors were. He wanted a Babymoon. She would give him a trip he would never, ever forget. She picked up her phone, her hand steady, her mind whirring with cold, calculated precision. Her first call was not to a divorce lawyer. It was to her father. "Dad," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion, "I need you to make a few calls for me. We need to liquidate some private assets and move them. Quietly. And I need the name of the best international banking security consultant you know. Conrad's on a trip. I want to make sure he has a memorable one." Arthur Davenport was a man who moved through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who had never lost a fight he cared about. Retired from the helm of a white shoe law firm that bore his name, he now spent his days managing his vast estate in Connecticut, but his mind had lost none of its predatory sharpness. When he heard his daughter's voice on the phone, flat, controlled, yet humming with a terrifying undertone, he knew this was not a social call. He listened without interruption for 10 minutes as Lorraine laid out the situation. He didn't offer condolences or platitudes. Arthur Davenport dealt in strategy, not sympathy. When she was finished, there was a brief pause. "The fool," Arthur said, his voice a low rumble. "He flew too close to the sun with another man's wings. Your wings, Lorraine. What is your objective?" "I want him crippled, Dad," she replied, the words tasting like metal in her mouth. "Not ruined. Ruin is messy and takes years. I want him isolated and powerless. I want him to understand what it feels like to have the world you built dissolve into thin air. The money, the access, the identity. All of it. Gone. A laudable goal, Arthur said, a hint of pride in his tone. Strategic, not emotional. Good. Here is what we will do. For the next 48 hours, Lorraine's penthouse became a war room. Arthur drove in from Connecticut, bringing with him a man named Peterson, a former MI6 agent who now ran a discreet private security firm in London, specializing in asset protection and recovery. Peterson was a pale, unassuming man in a rumpled suit who looked more like an accountant than a spy, but his eyes missed nothing. Together, the three of them mapped out Conrad Beaumont's entire financial and legal existence. Lorraine, as the co-signer on nearly every account and the architect of their family trust, held more power than Conrad had ever bothered to remember. The primary accounts are joint tenancy, Lorraine explained, pointing to a flowchart she'd drawn on a whiteboard. Nexus Pay stock brokerage accounts are main checking. He thinks that gives him equal access. But the family trust, which holds the bulk of our liquid assets, names me as the primary trustee with full discretionary power in the event of spousal incapacitation or malfeasance. I wrote that clause myself. Arthur permitted himself a small, wolfish grin. Malfeasance. A beautiful, wonderfully vague word. An affair with a pregnant employee, while you're 9 months pregnant yourself, I believe that qualifies. Peterson nodded. The offshore accounts in the Caymans and Switzerland are in his name only. Those will be harder to touch directly. We don't need to touch them, Lorraine countered. We just need to cut off his access to them. His passport. Conrad Beaumont, the global jet-setter, is nothing without it. Peterson leaned forward. You can't legally have a citizen's passport cancelled without cause. Of course not, Lorraine said, her voice cold. But a wife deeply concerned for her husband's increasingly erratic and paranoid behavior can certainly report his passport as lost or potentially stolen to the State Department. She can file a police report stating that in a fit of rage, he stormed out of the house taking his documents, and she hasn't been able to reach him since. She fears for his mental state and for what he might do. Such a report would trigger a flag in the international database. It wouldn't invalidate the passport immediately, but it would prevent him from boarding any commercial flight or crossing any border until the flag is cleared, a process that can take weeks. Arthur looked at his daughter with newfound respect. This was his blood, his legacy of strategic warfare, refined and weaponized. The plan was executed with military precision. Phase 1. Financial strangulation. On Monday morning, Lorraine, armed with a power of attorney Arthur had drafted years ago, visited their private banker at J.P. Morgan Chase. She calmly explained that due to a serious family emergency and concerns over Conrad's mental stability, she was invoking her rights as trustee. Within an hour, billions of dollars in assets were moved from their joint accounts into a new trust in her name only. The funds in the Cayman and Swiss accounts remained, but they were now islands unreachable without the passwords and security fobs that were sitting in a safe in their New York apartment. Next, she called the concierge at American Express. She was the primary holder of their coveted Centurion card, the mythical black card. Conrad's was a supplementary card. "I'm reporting my husband's card as stolen," she said, her voice laced with practiced distress. "His wallet was taken. Please cancel it immediately and flag all charges." She did the same for their Visa and MasterCard accounts. In the space of 3 hours, Conrad Beaumont's wallet, filled with plastic that could buy a skyscraper, became utterly useless. Phase 2. Digital isolation. Peterson handled the next part. He used a contact within a telecom provider to have Conrad's primary US cell number suspended, citing a security breach. His secondary burner phone would still work, but it was a prepaid device with a limited data plan. More importantly, it wasn't linked to any of his banking or security apps. Without his primary number, he couldn't receive the two-factor authentication codes needed to access his online banking, his crypto wallets, or even his corporate email. He was digitally castrated. Phase 3. The narrative. This was Lorraine's masterstroke. She didn't want Conrad to look like a cheating husband. She wanted him to look like a man who had lost his mind. It was a more effective way to neutralize him and garner sympathy. She sent a carefully worded email to the board of Nexus Pay and a few key trusted friends. Subject: personal update and request for discretion. Dear all, I'm writing to you with a heavy heart. As many of you know, Conrad has been under immense pressure lately. I'm afraid the stress has taken a severe toll on his mental health. He has become erratic and paranoid, and against my and his doctor's advice, he has left the country without notice. I am unable to reach him, and I am deeply concerned for his well-being. I am working with the relevant authorities to ensure his safety. In the meantime, I ask that you respect our family's privacy and direct all urgent Nexus Pay business to the COO. Please, if he contacts you, urge him to come home and get the help he so desperately needs. It was a work of art. It painted her as the worried, loyal wife and him as a tragic figure, not a villain. It sowed doubt and confusion, ensuring that if he did manage to call anyone for help, they would meet his pleas with suspicion and pity, not a lifeline. By Tuesday afternoon, the trap was set. Lorraine sat in her silent penthouse, looking out over the city. She felt a profound and terrible emptiness, but also a surge of power she hadn't felt in years. She had built an empire with him. Now she had taken it back. Meanwhile, 8,000 miles away, Conrad Beaumont was ordering another bottle of champagne, utterly oblivious that his kingdom had already fallen. The Serafina resort in the Maldives was less a hotel and more a private universe of indulgence. Each overwater bungalow was a self-contained estate, complete with a private infinity pool, a personal butler, and a glass floor in the living room for watching the kaleidoscopic marine life glide by. For 3 days, Conrad and Kira lived in a sun-drenched fantasy. They snorkeled with sea turtles, had massages on a secluded sandbank, and dined under the stars, their feet in the warm sand. Conrad felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years, away from the pressures of New York, away from the impending reality of fatherhood with Lorraine, a reality that had begun to feel more like a business merger than a loving partnership. He felt free. Kira, for her part, was playing the role of a lifetime. She was effusively grateful, endlessly adoring. She would gaze at him with worshipful eyes, telling him how powerful, how brilliant he was. She talked excitedly about their baby, a girl, she hoped. They would raise her between New York and maybe a house in the Hamptons. It was the exact fantasy Conrad wanted to hear. "You know," he said to her on their 3rd night, swirling a ridiculously expensive burgundy in his glass, "Lorraine just doesn't get this. She'd be analyzing the resort's profit margins. You just enjoy it. You live in the moment. It's easy to live in the moment when the moment is perfect," Kira cooed, leaning in to kiss him. The fantasy shattered the next evening at Azure, the resort's signature underwater restaurant. They were seated at the best table, surrounded by curved glass walls that gave them a 180-degree view of a coral reef teeming with life. It was breathtaking. The bill arrived in a small mother-of-pearl box. It was even for Conrad an eye-watering sum. He handed the waiter his Amex Centurion card without a second thought. The waiter, a polite man named Faris, returned a few minutes later, his expression apologetic. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Beaumont. The card has been declined." Conrad frowned. "Declined? That's not possible." "Run it again." Faris bowed slightly. "I have, sir. 3 times. The system says to contact the issuer." A flicker of annoyance. "Fine." Conrad pulled out his J.P. Morgan Reserve Visa. "Use this one." Faris returned again, his face now etched with discomfort. "My apologies again, sir. This one as well. And the MasterCard." Conrad's annoyance curdled into confusion. He could feel Kira's gaze on him, her perfect smile faltering. "This is ridiculous!" He snapped his voice louder than he intended. Several diners turned to look. "There must be a problem with your system." "Perhaps, sir," Faris said smoothly, though his eyes told a different story. "If you would be so kind as to speak with our resort manager, Mr. Hassan, he can assist you in his office." The walk from the underwater restaurant to the manager's office was the longest of Conrad's life. The hushed whispers of the other guests followed him like a trail of smoke. Kira trailed behind him, her silence a heavy weight. Mr. Hassan was a distinguished man, with silvering hair and an impeccably tailored suit. His office was a sanctuary of calm with mahogany furniture and views of a tranquil lagoon. His demeanor, however, was all business. "Mr. Beaumont," he began, his tone courteous but firm. "We have a slight issue. Not only was your card declined for tonight's dinner, but the pre-authorization we took on your Centurion card at check-in has also been revoked by the bank. As it stands, your entire stay, including the seaplane transfer, is currently unpaid." Conrad stared at him dumbfounded. "That's impossible. There are millions of dollars in those accounts." "That may be, but we are unable to access them," Mr. Hassan replied. "Do you have another form of payment? A wire transfer, perhaps?" Conrad pulled out his phone. He would fix this. A simple call to his private banker. He dialed the number, but it wouldn't connect. Call failed. He tried again. Nothing. He checked the signal. Full bars. He tried to open his banking app. Authentication required. "A code has been sent to your registered mobile number." He waited. No code arrived. A cold dread, slick and oily, began to seep into his veins. He tried to log into his Nexus Pay email. Password incorrect. He knew it was the right password. He tried the forgot password link. Recovery instructions sent to your primary contact email and phone number. His primary contact email was a private account he couldn't access, and the phone number was the one that was now mysteriously dead. He was locked out. He was completely and utterly locked out of his own life. "Kira," he said, his voice strained. "Give me your card. I'll pay you back." Kira looked at him, her eyes wide with a dawning panic. She was a marketing associate. Her credit card had a $10,000 limit. The bill for their stay was already approaching 6 figures. "Conrad, I can't cover this." Mr. Hassan cleared his throat. "Mr. Beaumont, our policy in these situations is quite clear. We will of course provide you with basic accommodation and meals. However, all non-essential services will be suspended. Your access to the spa, the fine dining restaurants, and the water sports facilities will be revoked. We will hold your luggage and passports as collateral until the bill, which currently stands at $112,450, is settled in full." Conrad felt the blood drain from his face. His passport. They had his passport. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered, the words feeling hollow even to him. "My wife. She must have. I need to call New York." Mr. Hassan offered him the use of his landline. Conrad frantically dialed his assistant, his friends, board members, anyone he could think of. The responses were all unnervingly similar, his assistant sounding flustered. "Conrad. Oh my God, are you okay? Lorraine told us you were having some kind of breakdown. We've all been so worried." A board member, his voice thick with false concern. "Conrad, my boy, just come home. Whatever it is, we can get you the help you need. Don't worry about the company, we'll handle things." No one would help him. Lorraine's narrative had reached them first. He wasn't a man in trouble. He was a man who was unwell. A liability. He finally hung up the phone, his hand trembling. He was stranded on a tiny speck of land in the middle of the Indian Ocean. He had no money, no working phone, no way to access his empire, and no way to leave. The beautiful turquoise water outside the window suddenly looked like the walls of a very luxurious, very expensive prison. He turned to look at Kira. The adoration in her eyes was gone, replaced by something else, fear and a cold, calculating assessment. The fantasy was over. Welcome to hell. The walk from the sun-drenched perfection of the resort's guest area to the functional hidden-away staff quarters was a journey across a social chasm. Led by two silent security guards, Conrad and Kira traversed a path he never knew existed, leaving behind the manicured gardens and infinity pools for a world of concrete walkways, humming generators, and the steamy industrial scent of the laundry facility. It was the resort's engine room, a place of work and function, never meant to be seen by the gilded class of guests. Their new room was a sterile box. Two narrow twin beds with thin starched sheets were pushed against opposite walls. A small barred window offered not a vista of the turquoise ocean, but a close-up view of a massive, perpetually spinning exhaust fan. The air was thick with humidity and the faint smell of bleach. As the heavy door clicked shut behind the guards, the finality of their situation settled with the suffocating weight of a physical blow. The paradise they had inhabited was a stage set, and they had just been unceremoniously shoved backstage. For the first 24 hours, Conrad vibrated with a furious, impotent energy. He paced the 4 short steps from the door to the window, and back a caged predator stripped of his teeth and claws. He would grab his dead phone and glare at the black screen, as if his sheer force of will could resurrect it. His mind, accustomed to solving complex code and navigating billion-dollar deals, could not process this simple, absolute powerlessness. "This is a kidnapping," he roared at Mr. Hassan during one of several fruitless visits to the manager's office. "It's illegal. I'll have your job. I will buy this entire God-forsaken island and turn it into a parking lot." Mr. Hassan, immaculate in his linen suit, simply listened with the patience of a man who had seen every form of wealthy hubris imaginable. "As soon as your bill is settled, Mr. Beaumont, you are free to go," he would reply, his voice a maddening oasis of calm. "Until then, our policy is firm." Kira watched this display with a growing sense of dread. The powerful magnetic CEO, she had idolized, the man who commanded boardrooms with a single glance, was gone. In his place was this red-faced shouting man, flailing against a wall of polite, immovable bureaucracy. The fantasy she had so carefully constructed, the life of effortless luxury, the ascension into New York's elite, the security she craved, was crumbling into dust. Her admiration, once the bedrock of their affair, was eroding with every failed threat he uttered, replaced by a cold, creeping contempt. He wasn't a king. He was a fool who had lost his crown, and he had dragged her down with him. By the second day, the silence between them in the small room had become a weapon. It was thick with unspoken accusations. His blame, her resentment. Finally it broke. "What is your plan, Conrad?" Kira asked, her voice tight and brittle. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. "Because pacing and yelling at the manager isn't working." He whirled on her, his eyes wild. "My plan. I'm trying to fix the mess she made. This is Lorraine. She's lost her mind. It's the pregnancy hormones. They've made her completely irrational. She's crazy." Kira let out a short, bitter laugh. "Crazy. Or the only sane one among us. She seems to have thought of everything with remarkable clarity. And don't you dare hide behind her pregnancy. You lied to a 9 months pregnant woman, Conrad. You lied to her face, then ran off with your younger, also pregnant mistress to a tropical paradise. What did you think was going to happen? Did you truly believe that Lorraine Davenport, the legal eagle who helped build your entire company, would just sit at home and knit booties?" The raw truth of her words was like a slap. He had been arrogant. He had seen Lorraine's pregnancy as a state of weakness, a distraction that would allow him to operate with impunity. He had forgotten the formidable intellect he had once so admired. "It was all going to be handled," he shot back, his voice defensive. "The divorce was going to be amicable. I was protecting her. Protecting her." Kira stood up, her eyes flashing with a fury that mirrored his own. "By humiliating her on a global scale, you weren't protecting her. You were protecting yourself from a difficult conversation. And what about me? You told me it was over between you two. You sold me a future that was apparently built on a foundation of lies. And what about your future?" he sneered, lashing out. "You think I don't know what this was about? You saw a ticket to the top and you took it. And what's wrong with that?" She screamed, tears of rage and self-pity welling in her eyes. "Isn't that how your world works? Everyone taking what they can. I've given years of my life to Nexus pay, working twice as hard for half the recognition. You promised me a promotion, a real seat at the table. Now my career is over. When this gets out, I'm not just the other woman. I'm the idiot who got stranded on a desert island with the CEO when his wife cut him off. I'm a punchline. Your career," he scoffed, the sound dripping with disdain. "I'm facing total catastrophic ruin. She is trying to steal my company." "It was her company too," Kira retorted. "And you were willing to risk it all for this. For us." The argument hung in the air, ugly and unresolved. The us that had felt so special and thrilling under the Maldivian sun was now revealed for what it was, a toxic cocktail of his ego and her ambition. Finally, on the third day, after dozens of failed calls, Conrad managed to get a line out to David Chen, his COO, and a man he'd considered one of his closest friends. The relief that flooded him upon hearing David's voice was immediate and overwhelming. "David, thank God, it's Conrad. Listen, I'm in serious trouble." He launched into a frantic, garbled explanation, the Maldives, the frozen accounts, Lorraine's episode. David's response was not the one he expected. There was no, "What can I do to help?" Instead, his voice was cautious, laced with a patronizing sympathy that made Conrad's skin crawl. "Whoa, Conrad, mate, just slow down. Take a breath. Lorraine called us. She told us you were under a lot of strain, that you'd snapped. We've all been so worried about you, man." "Worried, David, it's a lie. She's locked me out of everything." "Okay, pal, okay. Just focus on getting some rest. Don't worry about the company we're handling things here. The most important thing is for you to come home and get the help you need." Get the help you need? The phrase echoed in Conrad's ear. It was the masterstroke. Lorraine hadn't painted him as a villain. She'd painted him as a tragic, unstable figure. No one would wire money to a man having a mental breakdown. No one would take his side against his worried, pregnant wife. She hadn't just built a cage. She had convinced all his allies that it was a sanctuary for his own good. Desperation clawed at him. There was only one person who could undo this. He sent a pleading message through David, a final, desperate gambit. "Tell her I need to talk to her. It's about the baby, our son." He hated himself for using his unborn child as bait, but he was out of moves. He spent hours waiting by the phone in Mr. Hassan's office, a supplicant under the manager's watchful gaze. Finally, it rang. "Lorraine." He breathed his voice, a ragged mix of hope and dread. The voice that came back was as clear and cold as glacial ice. "Conrad." "Laurie, thank God. Listen, there's been a terrible, insane mistake. You've cut everything off. I'm trapped here. You have to call the banks. You have to fix this." "There's no mistake, Conrad," she replied, each word a perfectly polished stone. "This is not an error. This is a consequence." The word hung in the air between them. A consequence for what? A little trip. This is disproportionate. "Lorraine, it's insane." "No," she said. And he heard the shift in her voice from cold to dangerously sharp. "I have finally found my sense of proportion. You are in the Maldives with your pregnant mistress on what you have the audacity to call a babymoon, while I am days away from giving birth to our son. You stood in our home, looked me in the eye, and you lied. You didn't just underestimate my intelligence, Conrad. You underestimated my worth." "It's complicated." He stammered the words feeble, even to his own ears. "It's remarkably simple." She cut him off, her voice like steel. "You made a series of choices, and now I am making mine. Our financial empire was built on a foundation of mutual trust. You dynamited that foundation, so I have restructured our assets to protect myself, and more importantly, to protect my child's future." "Your child," he sputtered, indignation rising. "He's my son too, and those are my assets." A dead silence stretched over the line, a void of terrifying length. When she spoke again, her voice was low, almost conversational, and infinitely more menacing. "You should be more concerned about your immediate problems. Your hotel bill, for instance, and your passport. I was so worried when you stormed out that I felt compelled to report it stolen. Clearing that up from a foreign country with no money might be challenging." He felt the last of his strength drain away, leaving him hollow. She had anticipated everything. This wasn't an emotional outburst. This was an execution. "Lorraine, please," he begged, all pretense of anger gone, replaced by pure animal fear. "Don't do this. It's already done," she said softly. Then she twisted the knife. "By the way, Conrad, my father's security consultant, a very thorough man, did a little digging into your KJ. He thought it prudent to check her network activity at Nexus Pay. It seems your girlfriend has been quite busy." Conrad's blood ran cold. He glanced over at Kira, who was watching him from the doorway of the office, her face pale. "For the last 6 months," Lorraine continued, her voice as dispassionate as a newsreader's, "she has been downloading proprietary source code, sensitive investor data, and our 5-year strategic plan. She's been sending it all to a shell account that my consultant traced back quite easily, I might add, to a venture capital firm. A firm run by Richard Kessler." Kessler, his nemesis, the rival who had been trying to gut his company for years. The name landed like a physical blow. Lorraine let the silence stretch, allowing the full implication to sink in. So you see, Conrad, your affair wasn't just a personal humiliation for me. You brought a corporate spy into our lives. You gave her access that compromised our entire company, the company that I am still a major shareholder in. She paused, then delivered the killing blow. The board will be very interested to hear about this. I imagine they'll have some questions for you, if you ever make it back. The line clicked dead. Conrad stood frozen, the silent receiver pressed to his ear. He was no longer just a cheating husband. He was a fool, a dupe, the architect of his own company's potential destruction, and the woman he had discarded had just become his judge, his jury, and his executioner. The silence that followed the dead phone line was more profound than any sound Conrad had ever heard. It was a vacuum pulling all the air, all the heat, all the arrogance from the room. He slowly, mechanically placed the receiver back into its cradle. The small plastic click echoed like a gunshot in his mind, the sound of a door slamming shut on his entire existence. He was staring into the abyss, and the abyss had a name: Lorraine. But as he turned his head, his gaze fell upon Kira Jensen, and he realized the abyss had multiple flaws. Lorraine's betrayal was a masterpiece of strategic warfare, an act of such cold, calculated brilliance that a part of him, even in his ruin, could almost admire it. It was a response to his own actions. But Kira's betrayal was of a different sort. It was parasitic. She hadn't just cheated on him. She had used him as a host, a tool, a stepping stone in a grubby little game of corporate espionage. He had handed her the keys to his kingdom, and she had been systematically selling off the crown jewels. He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time. The doe-eyed adoration was gone, replaced by the raw, feral terror of a cornered animal. The curve of her belly, which he had once seen as a symbol of their secret, exciting future, now looked like a cancerous growth, a monument to his own spectacular stupidity. You, he whispered the word, a plume of toxic smoke. He felt no rage, only a vast, glacial emptiness. The whole time, every word, every touch, it was all a lie. Kira flinched, scrambling backward until her back hit the wall. The tears that streamed down her face were real now, born not of manipulation, but of pure panic. I had to. She sobbed the words, tumbling out in a desperate, pathetic rush. Richard Kessler. He promised me everything. He said you were a dinosaur, that Nexus Pay was a sinking ship. He promised me a senior position, a real future security. Security. Conrad's laugh started as a low tremor and erupted into a full-blown, unhinged cackle. It was the sound of a man breaking apart at the seams. Security. By committing federal crimes, by selling proprietary code, you absolute fool. You haven't secured a future. You've secured a federal indictment. You're finished. We're both finished. Mr. Hassan, who had stood by with the impassive professionalism of a mortician, finally stepped forward. He had overheard every word, his expression unchanging. Ms. Jensen, he stated, his voice as calm and unyielding as the tide. Given this new information and the fact that you are an accomplice in Mr. Beaumont's financial predicament at our resort, I'm afraid your position here is also untenable. Both of your passports will remain in our custody, pending further instructions. The shared prison cell of their staff quarters room became a new circle of hell. The air, already thick with the scent of industrial detergent from the nearby laundry, now crackled with silent loathing. They moved around each other like hostile ghosts in the cramped space, the memory of their intimacy a source of revulsion. Conrad would lie awake on his lumpy mattress, listening to the rhythmic churning of the giant washing machines, the sound a metronome counting down the seconds of his failure. He replayed every conversation, every flirtatious email, every late-night rendezvous with Kira, searching for the signs he had so blissfully ignored. They were all there, hiding in plain sight. He hadn't been seduced. He had been targeted. After 2 days marinating in this toxic silence, a sliver of his old self, the problem solver, the man of action, surfaced. He had to do something. He secured permission to use Mr. Hassan's office phone again, the manager watching him with weary resignation. His one remaining hope was the full might of the US government. He dialed the number for the US Embassy in Colombo, Sri Lanka. The faint crackle of the international line sounded like a lifeline. US Embassy Consular Section, how can I help you? The voice was flat, professional, bored. My name is Conrad Beaumont. He began trying to inject authority into his tone. I'm an American citizen, and I am being held against my will in the Maldives. Sir, are you in any physical danger? The officer asked a standard checklist question. No, not physical danger, but they've confiscated my passport. They won't let me leave. A pause. And why have they taken your passport, sir? Conrad's throat tightened. The words were humiliating to say out loud. It's a dispute over a hotel bill. I see, the officer said, and Conrad could practically hear him mentally filing this under rich idiot problems. Sir, that is a civil matter. The embassy cannot interfere in private financial disputes. Our official advice is to settle your bill. I can't. Conrad's voice cracked with desperation. That's the point. My accounts are frozen. My credit cards have been cancelled. My wife... Ah, yes. The officer cut in his voice, now taking on a new, cooler efficiency. We are aware of the situation with your passport, Mr. Beaumont. It has been flagged in the system. A lost or potentially stolen report was filed with the State Department from a precinct in New York City. Yes, that's what I'm telling you. It wasn't lost or stolen. My wife did that maliciously. Sir, that may be. However, until the reporting party officially retracts their report or the flag is cleared through an investigation, we cannot issue you an emergency travel document. The system simply won't allow it. You'll need to work with the reporting party, your wife, it seems, to resolve the issue. Conrad slammed the phone down. It was a perfect, inescapable trap, a bureaucratic Mobius strip designed by Lorraine. He couldn't pay the bill without access to money. He couldn't leave to get access to money without his passport. He couldn't get his passport without clearing the flag. And he couldn't clear the flag without the cooperation of the very person who had put him in this cage. He slumped into the chair, defeated. He was no longer Conrad Beaumont, Titan of Industry. He was case file number 734, a problem to be managed. His deliverance, when it came, was as humbling as his fall. The next afternoon, Mr. Hassan summoned him. The manager's expression was for the first time unreadable. Mr. Beaumont, we received an anonymous wire transfer moments ago for the full outstanding balance of your bill. A surge of adrenaline, of pure, unadulterated relief shot through Conrad. She was letting him go. She had made her point, and now she was letting him off the hook. Furthermore, Mr. Hassan continued sliding a single sheet of paper across his mahogany desk. A one-way ticket has been booked in your name. It is for a flight from Malé to New York, connecting through Dubai. It departs tomorrow morning at 6:05 a.m. He paused, letting the information sink in. It is an economy class ticket. The relief curdled into shame. This wasn't a reprieve. It was a leash. She was summoning him, but on her terms, stripping him of every last vestige of his former status. Your passport, Mr. Hassan added, will be handed to you by our representative at the check-in counter at Villana International Airport. You will not receive it before then. He looked Conrad squarely in the eye. The arrangements cover you and you alone. Ms. Jensen's situation remains unresolved. The journey home was a 22-hour pilgrimage of shame. At the airport, he was just another face in the swarming, chaotic crowd. He stood in the long, snaking security line, the press of humanity around him, a stark contrast to the sterile solitude of the private terminals he was used to. On the plane, he was wedged into a middle seat in row 42, his knees pressed against the seat in front of him, a crying baby behind him, and a man with a hacking cough beside him. The flight attendant handed him a plastic-wrapped tray of lukewarm chicken and rice, and he ate it because he was starving. Stripped of his phone, his watch, his wallet, he had nothing to do but think. The recycled air and the low drone of the engines became the soundtrack to his internal reckoning. He saw his life with Lorraine not as a marriage, but as a long-term investment she had made, one he had foolishly tried to liquidate. He had seen her intelligence as an asset to his company, but had forgotten it was an integral part of her being, a weapon she could wield with terrifying precision. His anger had evaporated, replaced by a cold, primal fear of the woman he had married. He landed at JFK, looking like a shipwreck survivor. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, his designer suit rumpled and stained. He hailed a yellow cab, the smell of stale coffee and cheap air freshener, an assault on his senses. As the taxi lurched through the familiar streets of Manhattan, everything looked different, as if he were seeing it through a distorted lens. The doorman at his building, a man to whom he had handed a $1,000 bill every Christmas, met his eye with a flicker of recognition, followed by a deep, profound pity that was more insulting than any contempt. The elevator ride up was silent. The penthouse door opening into a cavern of echoes. The place was sterilized. All of Lorraine's personal touches were gone. Her collection of first-edition novels, the abstract art she'd chosen for the foyer, the silver-framed photos of their wedding, their travels, their life. All gone. He walked numbly through the vast space until he reached the nursery. The door was ajar. He pushed it open, and his breath caught in his throat. It was utterly bare. The hand-painted mural of the night sky was gone, painted over in a stark, clinical white. The crib, the changing table, the rocking chair, where he had once imagined himself reading to his son, all had vanished. It was an erasure, a statement that the future he had betrayed would never come to pass. On the cold marble of the kitchen island, stark against the grey stone, lay a single thick manila envelope. His name was typed on the front. His hands, clumsy and trembling, fumbled with the clasp. Inside the papers were cool and heavy. Legal documents. The top one was a petition for divorce, citing infidelity and moral turpitude. Beneath that, a temporary restraining order, a legal wall keeping him 500 feet from Lorraine and her father's estate in Connecticut. And under that, a formal notice of an emergency meeting of the Board of Directors of Nexus Pay, its purpose, stated in cold corporate language, to discuss the immediate removal of CEO Conrad Beaumont for gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. He felt the floor tilt. Tucked inside the sheaf of divorce papers was one final sheet. It was not a legal document, but a piece of thick cream-colored stationery. Her elegant cursive handwriting was the final precise incision. Conrad. By now you understand. The board meeting is tomorrow at 10 a.m. I suggest you attend. They are prepared to vote you out of the company you founded, with cause stripping you of your severance and a significant portion of your remaining stock options. They have copies of Kira's emails and a signed affidavit from her, secured by my father's lawyers, in exchange for leniency in her own legal troubles. There is, however, another option. I am exercising my right as a co-founder and major shareholder to take over as interim CEO. If you agree to my terms, a swift, uncontested divorce, a full transfer of the family trust and the New York property, to me and your complete and permanent resignation from Nexus Pay, I will ensure you walk away with a small percentage of your original stock. Enough to live comfortably, but not enough to ever hurt anyone on this scale again. This is not a negotiation. This is the new reality. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to have your lawyer contact mine with your acceptance. William Arthur Davenport was born 2 days ago. He is healthy and he is beautiful. You will not be a part of his life. He deserves a better role model. Lorraine. The papers slipped from his numb fingers, scattering across the floor like dead leaves. William Arthur Davenport. Her name. Her father's name. His son branded with the sigil of the dynasty that had crushed him. He didn't just sink to the floor. He collapsed the strength, leaving his bones, the world narrowing to a single point of blinding absolute defeat. He was a king with no kingdom, a father with no son, a man with no name, but the one he had disgraced. He was alone in his empty palace, a ghost in the ruins he himself had created. And so Conrad Beaumont's gilded world came crashing down, not with a bang, but with the quiet, calculated click of a woman reclaiming her power. This wasn't just a story of infidelity. It was a masterclass in consequences. Lorraine Davenport proved that the quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous when pushed too far. She didn't just get mad. She got strategic. She used the very tools of the empire she helped build to dismantle the king who betrayed her, securing a future for herself and her child, not as a victim, but as a victor. It's a chilling reminder that hell hath no fury, like a brilliant woman scorned. What do you think? Was Lorraine's revenge justified, or did she go too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story of justice and dramatic downfall, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a good revenge tale, and make sure you subscribe to our channel. We bring you the most shocking, unbelievable, true-life dramas every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next.